part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, all part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Thanks for tuning in and listening, everyone. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol.
This is a very interesting episode for us because our next guest here on this episode is someone that I grew up, rooting for, along with a lot of other guys that we've had on here. That's no different. But this one was interesting. Former Cleveland Cavalier, not really known for being with the Cavs, Scott, but mostly with the Seattle Sonics before getting traded there. Shawn Kemp, the Rain Man, one of the most electrifying players in the NBA in the 90s during those years.
When you think of about maybe 3, 4, 5 players of the 90s, you got Jordan, you got, there's a whole bunch of players. You got Charles Barkley from the 80s and 90s. He's right up there. He was a big name. He came out of high school and when he came out, when he was 19, 20 years old, he took the NBA by storm. We had never seen a player that could do what he could do.
And this guy was what players nowadays are doing, that could dunk, that were, athletic as all get out, jumping through the roof, doing, athletic moves that you see now. The kids these days see it and think it always, was the case. And it wasn't until by around the early 90s when Shawn Kemp came on board. Scott, I remember when the Cavs traded for him, it was so close to the beginning of the season of the 97 season. And I remember I was on my way to school, and I remember mom was watching the news before going to school and had it on in the background. And they actually mentioned it on the local news. And I was like, what? No way. And I remember going on the school bus and talking to all of our buddies about it because, I obviously, loved the Cavs, but my second team back in those days were the Sonics because of Shawn Kemp. That was really cool.
Sure. And this was all after the Cavs of the late 80s, early 90s. And then they went through kind of a couple years where they were transitioning. And we really thought that Shawn Kemp was going to be the player that was going to bring him to the promised land. And, maybe he'll shed some insight on this, but they were real close back then in the mid late 90s. A lot of people forget about that. So he might have some interesting stories, I'm sure, about playing for the Cavs and his growing up. It'll be interesting to hear. We're really looking forward to this, especially my brother, I'm sure. We're going to talk to Shawn Kemp right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network, right after this.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it, Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Tapped away, McMillan to McKee. Up to Gary Payton. Lead pass to Kemp. He'll slam down. What a lob! Whoa! Gary Payton with a lob ahead to Kemp. He went airborne, defied gravity.
Comes out of the blocks on fire. Oh, raging right-handed tomahawk jam from the Rain Man. Oh, my goodness.
Tripped by Nate McMillan, who tightropes the sideline. Shawn Kemp.
You know what Shawn Kemp is all about.
In left in this opening period. Look out! The Rain Man brings down a little thunder. Shawn Kemp with a right-hand jam.
Has it tapped away by Payton. Grabbed by Kemp. He'll challenge Kyle.
Oh, my Don't goodness. Do that!
He threw it down!
But alive. Shawn Kemp standing all by himself to bring it down with some purpose.
Cavaliers by 3. Shawn Kemp to crash
knocks it down. Oh, yeah. And one more coming from the line as the Rain Man took it strong to the bucket.
Man, those highlights bring back some great memories. Welcome back, everyone, to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. If you're a fan of the NBA in the 1990s, then you know our guests very well, especially if you are a Seattle Supersonics fan or a Cleveland Cavaliers fan in the late 90s. This man was one of the best, if not the greatest in-game dunker of all time, right up there with Vince Carter. He was a 6-time NBA All-Star, played for the Cavaliers for 3 years, and was an All-Star in his first year in Cleveland. Our guest today, you heard him right there in those highlights, the Rain Man himself, Shawn Kemp. Shawn, thanks for coming on the podcast with us. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Shawn, when you just heard some of those highlights, do you get bored hearing that, or does that bring back some good memories?
No, it brings back good memories. I'm always a fan of listening or hearing anything that has to do with the 90s basketball. And I'll just tell you guys, just to start off, I generally don't criticize the game today or the players that play the game today, but I will tell you this. I feel grateful that I played in the 90s in that era of great basketball. And it's a reason why that they say, you remember these commercials back in the day, they would say, the NBA is fantastic. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily say that anymore. And I can't tell you why, but there's a reason why they used to say that back in the day.
So, Shawn, we'll get into the NBA and your time with the Cavs in just a second, but what are you up to these days in Seattle?
I mean, I've been in Seattle for a number of years. I have my family's here. I've been married for 21 years, first of all. So me and my wife's from Seattle area. So we've been involved with the community around here for decades, doing stuff from everything from helping out the homeless to running league games, basketball league games and stuff. And she's actually a college coach also. So this has been a city where I've kind of grew up in and kind of learned how to be a millionaire and then learn how to take care of my money and things of that nature. So Seattle's been good to me. Not just playing for the Sonics, but the city in general has been great to me because it's taught me so many things in life, man. So many things that you need to know in lifetime.
For those who don't know, you've embarked on a business adventure about a year ago this month, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I actually I started a retail store here in Seattle, and we've done very well. And a cannabis retail store. It's something that I had sought out for a number of years of doing. So I partnered up with some people. We've completed that. Now we're actually growing. We're going to open up 4 more locations around this city. And then I think we're going to do some things brought outside of the area, even outside of the state. So, so that the business is going fine. And I'm still learning a lot of stuff as I go along. But I really got into this business because of, me wanting to do medicine, put my name on medicine. As people, and this is me telling you guys, as people think about cannabis and they think about marijuana and these things, the upside to this is that years from now, cannabis will be more valuable to us on the medicine side of anything. It has nothing to do with, guys going out smoking joints of anything. But when I got into this, I had a number of people that was working for me. Some of these people had kids that have epilepsy, of things of this nature, and these products really help their kids. But this was like a last solution for their kids. So when I got into this business, it wasn't something that I say, hey, I'm doing this because I generally want to go around the country promoting people smoking dope and things of that nature. I really got into this thinking that eventually in this world, these things are going to be more valuable to us than what we realize. And as I got into this business already, man, like now I'm creating a lot of my shoes that I make. And I'm going to try to use hemp to create those shoes. So there's so many things of this business that we kind of touched on, but we haven't really know what the final details of it. And that's kind of why I got into this business, because I thought it had a great upside.
Well, congratulations on celebrating your 1-year anniversary, and good luck. And again, for people that don't know, it's called Kemp's Cannabis there in Seattle.
Correct. The Shawn Kemp Cannabis. I'm right here downtown Seattle on First Avenue. As I said before, we've really done well business-wise in the last year. We really got around to the community of identifying ourselves with people and things of that nature. Now it's just about continually trying to get this business to grow and getting other locations and broadening it out and doing other things. As I said, really put my name on like lotions and creams and CBD oils of that nature. That's my plan in this business.
So, Shawn, let's get back to your roots. You know, we already talked about Seattle being your home for a long time. You played in Seattle, but you're a Midwest kid at heart growing up in Indiana. Who got you involved with basketball? Indiana's a hotbed for basketball. Who is the one who pointed you in that direction?
No, absolutely, man. I'm from Indiana. And thank God I'm from Indiana, because you guys know by playing in the Midwest, one of the things that you're able to do is, learn the game of basketball. So what I mean by that, it means that like me growing up basketball, I was able to play all 5 positions. So if you're able to learn the game in a fundamentally aspect, I played for a guy, his name was Jim Hahn. He recently died, my high school coach. He recently died here of cancer here this past year, which was tough for all of us. But he always told me, he said that, you have to have the mindset of being able to learn multiple positions, and you have to be a quick learner. You have to be able to pick up on things without having an attitude or a one way of thinking. You have to have an open mind of thinking of certain things, and then generally you can learn very quickly. So, just using those guidelines, what he gave me back in high school, man, just being able to learn the game of basketball. I really learned it really fast, man. So, with his instruction, it really went from me getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, going down there, working on footwork drills, post moves, ball handling drills, things of that nature, just to try to get myself prepared to see if I could even play in college, man. Because, growing up in the Midwest, there's so many kids that have this desire, this dream to play basketball that we all forget. Some of us make it and some of us don't. In my day, I had the height, the size, and then also I think I just had the ability to want to learn. And when you have that, then the sky's the limit for you.
So you were one of the very first, not the first, but one of the very first to make the jump from high school to the NBA. You were talking about, you were wondering if you were going to play college, but you made the jump to the NBA. What went through that decision, and how scary was it to go from, hey, I'm a Midwest kid playing in high school, to all of a sudden I'm at the big stage?
Absolutely, man. And not just a Midwestern kid, a country Midwestern kid, man. So, it just tells you that anything is possible. I was just one of those kids who always had these dreams. And not only did I have these dreams, I would kind of share them with people around me. So, in 6th grade, I would tell my classmates, one of these days, hey, man, I want to play in the NBA. I want my own shoe. So me and my classmates back in 6th grade, we would start designing shoes. So of course, I took a little bit of that shoe design and added it into my shoes. Once I got into the NBA, I saved that. So that's what it's all about. I think, and I'm being honest with you guys. They say you have to be really talented. Yeah, you have to be talented, but also you really have to be smart. And your decision making, and also who your friends are. And I just think I was able to put a lot of good people around me as a young kid. That's how I blossomed so fast, and my work ethic was great also.
Shawn, do you think the NBA should rescind the rule of not allowing high school kids in the draft?
Well, I think that high school kids should obviously have a chance. How can you tell someone that they don't have a chance to make a living, first of all? And second of all, it seems so illegal, to do such a thing. I think the NBA was wrong for what they done, but I also think they have clarification on what they're trying to get across to kids, because they don't want every kid coming out of high school going to the pros, because you only have one chance at this, man. You have one shot at this. You can't turn around and say you're going to go to the NBA, then all of a sudden go back to college. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I think the message that the NBA is trying to send is like, look, guys, we've seen a number of kids go from high school to pro. Make sure that you're really thinking about this decision before you do it. But I also think they'll go back and they'll change that around and make it fair for everybody to have a chance to come out eventually and go back to the pros. But it's such a tough thing to do, man. This is me I'm telling you guys, it's such a tough thing to do because generally most of these guys go to college for 4 years. They've been working on footwork drills and basketball IQs for so many years. In order for you to get out there and to be able to perform with them, you have to have the same IQ as they do, and you have to have the same footwork as they do. And generally, that's not going to happen. Maybe it will, but maybe it won't. You could get lucky, but generally, it's just not going to happen. So I know the amount of work that I had to put into it was a lot, but I also will tell you this, man, the rules of the game has changed. The way that the players practice have changed. And I think a lot of things in basketball in the future is going to change. I tell people all the time, but I think eventually you'll see a woman playing NBA one of these days.
Do you still follow the NBA on a regular basis, especially when the playoff times? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of basketball. I've always been, and not only do I follow the NBA, I follow the WNBA very closely. I think I'm big fans of both. Obviously, the NBA game has grown, but I'm a big fan of the WNBA game. These girls, mechanic-wise, they're probably better than most of these NBA players. Mm-hmm.
So I know you said before you don't want to necessarily and use the word criticize the NBA because it has changed a lot. So I'll just ask this question. What do you think about the game now in general and its emphasis on three-point shooting? It's changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it really has, but that's because they wanted it to change. Mm-hmm. And not because the players necessarily wanted to change. That's because the NBA wants to change. Mm-hmm. And, there's a reason behind that, and I'll tell you guys, there's a reason behind that. In order for the NBA to be able to keep those ratings at that high peak as they do worldwide. And you got to remember nowadays, the NBA game is so different because it's worldwide. Mm-hmm. Back in the 90s, it was just getting to be worldwide. There was a few overseas guys, but not very many. Mm-hmm. But now that half the league is almost from overseas, they have to generally change these rules up to make sure that these guys can play the game. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have seen these rules change, because they want these guys to not just to come over here, but to do well. Mm-hmm. So this is the product that we get. Not saying that it's good or bad. I'm just saying this is intentionally done by the NBA.
Well, speaking of change, at 6'10", you played power forward, but you weren't your normal power forward at the time when you broke into the early 90s. There wasn't a power forward as fast, as athletic, that could jump to the roof as you could, and at least had a good mid-range jumper. I mean, you had hops that guards had at the time. It seemed like you opened the door for athletic power forwards like a Kevin Garnett. Like, you were the first of your kind back then, Shawn. How is that when you look back at your time, when you really look at that? How's that kind of resonate with you?
No, absolutely, man. When I look back, man, I think, sometimes I laugh. I when I see anything from Kobe, if I see anything from Kevin, I generally smile, because those are both my guys. I knew them both as kids when they were young. And I was happy to see them do well in the NBA. It was something when I was asked when they were young, could they make it? I say, absolutely. Those two they could definitely make it. Kobe was a lot like myself, where he was taking on guys from the NBA in 9th to 10th grade, and he was already beating them. Myself, I was playing against guys in the 9th to 10th grade, and I was also beating them. Mm-hmm. So with Kevin, he wasn't as strong as a kid. He was matured a little bit late in high school, the 11th to 12th grade year. But by the time he was a senior in high school, they knew that he was ready for the NBA. He was jumping out of the gym. He was shooting three-pointers, and he was basically playing point guard. So he was just a natural fit to be, great in the NBA.
So, Shawn, you still think your style in the 90s could fit in today's game, even with the evolution of the massive barrage of three-point shooting?
Well, absolutely, because I think the style of basketball that I actually played, man, is what we all learn in the Midwest, and that's just to be fundamentally sound, to be able to use left hand, right hand, to be able to adapt to every situation. The one thing about growing up in the Midwest is that, man, we learn how to do everything. You guys know this. You guys have played on teams when you were young, when you were the center, and then you all of a sudden played on teams when you were the guard. Mm-hmm. So it was the same for me. just having that fundamental background, I think, is what really saved me when I got to the NBA, because a lot of this is just repetitions of you knowing things. And then when I felt like I was right there, even with these guys that had already went to college, or even a little bit above them, because I had the knowledge of so much of basketball.
So I know my brother mentioned earlier that we had Mark Price on our podcast a couple of months ago, and he talked about how different MJ was. And I know you only played them, the Bulls, against them twice during the regular season, but you played them in the 96 playoffs. And I remember watching that. How was it playing against him specifically back then, right, at his height?
Well, Michael at his height. First of all, I mean, you have to notice about Michael. He's a great poker player.
Oh yeah,
yeah, he's a great poker player. So, a great poker player is never going to show you his face. He's never going to show you his fears. And I think that was the one thing that Michael was able to do through his career, was to able to be mentally strong. Man, people talk about, they say, by Michael Jordan. I say, hey, man, Michael Jordan was a very smart man, man. He knew exactly how to put himself in certain positions throughout the game to really do well. And he also had a great relationship with his coaches, and he had great communication with his players on the team. And they say, is he that good? And I said, well, yeah, I think he was that good. I personally do. I think that the way that he thought the game was a little bit ahead of schedule. He was ahead of us on the way that he thought the game a little bit.
You listen about Larry Bird, even the generation or half generation before, he was one of those guys too. He would never show his face, but
absolutely.
There's another guy, same like that in the 80s.
There you go. That's Larry Bird's my idol. I'm from Indiana. And there you go. So those fundamentals that Larry Bird did. My game is patterned right after Larry Bird. I just jumped a little bit higher.
Right.
That was the whole thing. So, and a lot of people don't really know this, but yeah, of course, when I patterned my whole entire game after Larry Bird, because I knew if I could shoot the basketball, I would do okay. And if I could do fundamentally inside, do well, I would do okay. That's why I wore number 7 when I played for Dream Team 2. I wore number 7 because Larry wore number 7 when he played for Dream Team 1.
Oh, I didn't know that. Very cool.
Yeah.
No, Shawn, I saw at the grand opening of your shop last year around this time, in some of the news outlets there, they had video of your ribbon cutting ceremony, and former Seattle Supersonics teammate and good friend Gary Payton was there. How often do you keep in contact with him or any other of your other former teammates in your 14-year career in the league?
All the time. I talked to Gary last night, actually, man. We're going to the Krakens. We'll be at the first Krakens game on the 23rd next week. So we'll be attending the first Krakens game together, the first hockey game here. But I talked to him. I talked to Detlef a lot. Detlef Shrimp, Sam Perkins. Of course, man, these are guys. As a young man at the time, and I'm younger than these guys. These guys, when they not only schooled me on the court, but they schooled me business wise. So I always. Even through the toughest times of my life and career, I always felt like I always had that fight in me, because I always knew I had support from other guys, and other players of that nature. So, Detlef has always been a great friend, man, and checked on me from time to time. And Sam is great, but me and Gary generally talk every week, man. We still, we're very competitive, and we still talk every week just to make sure. He's a coach now over at Lincoln University there in Oakland. He's a head basketball coach. So I'm happy for him in that regard. But absolutely, man, I think a lot of us guys in the Seattle area keep close network on each other, and we communicate.
So we already talked about Larry Bird. He was a big trash talker. Jordan the same way, and even Gary Payton too. Do you have any podcast friendly stories of Gary Payton talking trash to Jordan back in the day?
Man, I do. I'll just tell you guys this, man. And I am what you call the guy who can see things. So I want to antagonize a little bit, So
the bear, right?
Of course, man. I got into the NBA before Gary got into the NBA, and Gary did really well in college. So of course, when Gary got to the team, if I felt like I had like I had an armored truck around me. It's like now I got somebody to run. Not only do I have somebody to run around the league with me, now I have someone who can run around and talk for me. So of course, my first battle with Michael is me hyping up Gary, telling him, there he is right there. There's the guy right there, man. You gotta go say something to him. I told Gary, you gotta let him know who you are. You have to represent yourself. Let him know that you're not scared of him. We play him tomorrow. He's right there. So when Gary goes up to Michael in the first meeting, Michael, they get back and they're talking trash to each other. Michael says to Gary, Gary says, well, I drive a Ferrari just like you do. A Ferrari, a car. You know better than I am, Michael. And then Michael turns around and he says, well, Gary, I drive my Ferraris for free.
What did Gary say?
He didn't have to say anything. I just patted him on the shoulder and I said, come on, let us walk away. There's nothing else to be said.
Oh, that's funny.
There's nothing else to be said. And that's Michael Jordan, man. You're not gonna outdo Michael, man. So so that carried on for years and years until we played the championship. And there was always this battle of me telling Gary, run over to him and say some challenging. Get up in his face and challenge him. Nobody challenges this guy. Why is everybody sitting back? You need to get into his face and challenge this guy. And it still didn't work.
It didn't work for anybody, Shawn.
It didn't work for no one.
Now, before we started recording, I was telling you about my my jerseys of Mark Price when I was a kid. I showed you your jersey that I had when I was younger. I had your shoes, Shawn. I had your Kamikaze 2s.
Yeah.
The black, green, and white ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know recently, I don't know which outlet or store, but they brought those back for a limited release, I think, right?
Oh, yeah. No, they're still selling them. Yeah.
Now, I know you said when you were little, you designed your shoes. Did you have a say in the design of that shoe there in the mid to late 90s?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you still own any of the original ones? Because I'm sure you probably have some of the newer ones too, right?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I still have some of the original ones. Man, I saved some of the original ones to this day. Some of the ones that I still play that I probably still have a couple hundred pairs still to this day. So
wow.
Yeah. So it's I was, like I said, one thing about me, man, like coming from Indiana, we appreciate memorabilia. We appreciate the other stuff that goes around sports also. So through my career, I was trying to save so many things, man, like high school jerseys and, my NBA jerseys and slam dunk contest jerseys and stuff. And that's kind of when I created this store, since it's right down the street from the new arena. We're just 2 blocks from the new arena. I put a lot of that stuff in display inside the store here, from like my slam dunk uniforms to all that stuff. I was like, when I open up these stores, I'm gonna go to every store and put some memorabilia in every store for people to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my follow-up to that is when we interview, athletes like this, and then, in my career, talking to them when we're just kind of hanging out on the field or on the court, I always like to know, how many do you have of those, those jerseys, because of, there's just so many. It's cool to hear that you guys still have some, that you still have
right.
some. You talk about the 90s. NBA Jam, the Sonics were my team. What was it like being part of that iconic game?
Hey, I'll tell you what, like I said, in this store, even in my store that I'm at today, I in the front door, I keep free NBA Jam machines for people to come in and play all day long.
Neat. I love that.
Yeah. So I figure, it's just part of it, man. It's like, hey, I said, let me get these free. Let me get a couple of these NBA Jam machines, and that way, when people come in, they can just play for a little bit.
My son's 16, and I have the old system in NBA Jam in my basement, and I go, oh, this is what we used to play back in the day, and he's looking at it, and because he plays the newer ones,
right? And
then I'll play them, and then of course I just smoke them every time, and he's like, Dad, how'd you do that? I go, well, you got to know the certain code, and
that's right.
Oh, it's good, and of course, yeah, you and Gary Payton and the Sonics, and there were a few other big teams on there. We love still
Oh,
playing.
yeah, they had the Houston Rockets. They're
Yes,
pretty good team.
yes.
The Knicks were pretty good.
Yeah.
Charlotte Hornets. They had
Charlotte Hornets, yeah.
Well, yeah. So, no, I mean, I do, man. We're big NBA Jam machine. We play this game still to a lot around here.
So take us back now. We're going to go back to 1997. It's September 25th. It was the day that Seattle traded you to the Cavaliers, Cleveland Cavaliers. Were you surprised, question one? And when you found out, how did you feel about coming to Cleveland from Seattle?
Well, I mean, since you guys are from Cleveland, I'll let you guys into an insight on that whole transformation now, about that whole deal. The reason that me coming to Cleveland, the reason that transpired is because of if you remember that year before the All-Star game was in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So once I had got there and I'd seen the arena, and I was very impressed with Cleveland because you guys, we talked about this earlier. He was like, the Cavs used to play in Richfield. And so my trips to Cleveland were so bad because we used to have to take this bullshit drive from Cleveland out to Richfield.
Oh, yeah.
So that year was the first year that I had ever really hung out like downtown Cleveland and saw Cleveland because of the All-Star game. And once I came downtown Cleveland and I kind of saw the city and I met some people there in Cleveland, man, I was a fan of Cleveland. I really was. I was a fan of Cleveland, and I actually went back and let the Cavs know that I was very interested in coming to the city.
Mm.
The other part of it was this. It was I get this phone call and it says that, and they were saying, well, Mr. Gunn was the owner of the team. Mm-hmm. And obviously he's blind, he can see. So Mr. Gunn used to listen, he would listen to the radio games, the games on the radio. And from our conversations, he was like, there's only one or two guys that he really liked to listen to because he didn't feel like a lot of the players had the hustle on them. And I was one of the couple of guys that he really liked to listen to on the radio because he enjoyed listening to these games on the radio, man, because you can't see him. And it was exciting for him to hear some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, after hearing that, man, I was really amazed that he was listening to games on the radio. So I was all for it, man. The actual trade was them trying to send me to Milwaukee just for Vin Baker. That was the actual trade. And then I said, no, I said, there's the only way that I'll go back to the East Coast is if they send me to Cleveland. And then they called me back an hour later and they was like, yo, you just been traded to Cleveland. And I was like, all right, good. I'm all aboard. I'm ready to go. And, the only thing about being in Cleveland is we were just one player short, man. We had some good backup guys. Bobby Sora, a lot of those guys, Brevin Knight that I played with, those guys were great to play with. But generally, to go against Michael Jordan at that time, we really needed one more. We needed one more, guy to bring in at least 20 or 25 a game every night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that first year, you guys went 47-35, went to the playoffs, bounced in 4 games to Indiana. So you guys were almost building something, but you said you're missing another player there. Man, a lot of young guys, a lot of rookies around you then.
Not just that, and I'll tell you guys this, man, I had played a number of years in the NBA before I got to Cleveland, but I really enjoyed playing in Cleveland. I was really disappointed in Cleveland when they got rid of Mike Fratello. Mike Fratello is a great coach, man. A lot of guys don't like him because he's kind of in-your-face guy. But, I mean, generally, if you're from the Midwest, that's what coaches are. They're generally in your face. So it wasn't a big deal to me. But I think a lot of guys had a problem with that. But I didn't have a problem with that. I think that our team in Cleveland suffered because they fired Mike Fratello. I honestly believe that. I really do. And I can tell you, I can tell you this right now. I played for George Karl, he's a great coach, man. Me and Coach Karl, we're to this day, we're still good friends. I love him to death. But Mike Fratello is probably my favorite coach. Well, I mean, George is probably my favorite coach to play for, but Mike Fratello is right there, right? He's right below him, right below George, man.
And George Karl was a coach for the Cavs too back in the early mid-'80s, early on in his career.
I remember that. So, and I really like Mike Fratello. I just like the way he thought, his process of thinking throughout the game. I had never played for a coach who didn't play the game of basketball, so it was I wasn't really open to learning from him at first. But once I got to meet him and know Mike Fratello, man, I really bought into what he was doing, and I think my numbers. If you look at my career, my best numbers is probably playing for him throughout my career because I had so much fun playing for him.
So you played a little over 200 games for the Cavs, 3 years roughly. How would you describe in one or two sentences your 3 years in Cleveland? You talked about Mike Fratello, Cleveland itself. It seemed like it was 3 years, but it was a quick 3 years. How would you describe that if someone were to ask you?
I would say too quick and fun for me, but the city of Cleveland needed somebody to be a winner in that arena. And this is just the God's honest truth. When you build an arena like that for a city, the city deserves to have a winning team in there. I just don't think we made the right decisions with maybe me and all of those rookies. I think I played with maybe 7 or 8 rookies my first year there in Cleveland. So, you're not gonna go very far with that. Regardless of what you think. You at least got it. Maybe if you have 2 or 3 rookies on your team, but if you got more than 5 rookies on your team, you're probably not going to go that far. Mm-hmm. That's just the God's honest truth. But I enjoyed playing for Cleveland. It was so different, man, because my whole career I played in Seattle and I had been playing kind of the small forward, power forward. But when I got to Cleveland, we had no big men. I mean, absolutely no big men. And then I and for so many years I played for Seattle, we had centers on our team. And then once I got there, I'm playing against Patrick Ewing every night and all these big 7-footers every night. Man, it makes you rethink your game. That's why back then it was just like, I need to put on some weight. If I'm going to have to play the center spot, the only way I'm going to last is if I put on some weight. And a lot of people didn't understand that. But if you're playing that center spot, you're going against Patrick Ewing every night. You got to get a little bigger to play that center spot, right? That's just the truth of it.
So, yeah. Shawn, real quick, do you still play? Do you still play on the side? Pick up games every once in a while?
Yes, I do. My wife is so funny. She runs these 40 and over and 50 and over leagues, and definitely, I'm all in there, man. I'm still playing. I'm still playing. It takes me a minute to get down court, but it's still deadly if I can get a touch on it.
Oh man, I would love to see that. It'd be great. You schooling some kids on the local rec here. It'd be fun to watch.
My son is a freshman. He goes to Southeastern Louisiana State. And so when he comes home, we sometimes go out and play. And the kids, they have a kick out of it, man. Everybody on the court is trying to dunk on me. I don't get it.
Shawn, one last question. I know you got a meeting you got to go to here. We're going to end this on a really great, fun note here. I once read a story with your last year with the Cavs, and I want to know if this is true or not, that you blamed being late to the team plane because your dog was sleeping in front of your car and you couldn't wake him up. Is that true?
That's not true. That's not true at all. No.
Good. Have you heard that though? Have you heard that story?
I've never heard, man. My God. Man, there's so many stories, man. I started hearing these stories, and I started hearing these stories when I left Cleveland. That's why I knew that I had pissed some people off back there. So, I started, but no, that's definitely not true. I was probably late, but I was just late, just being late, man.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you that because I read that somewhere and I'm like, that can't be true. No. But let me ask Shawn anyway.
I would have kicked the shit out that dog.
Well, Shawn, I know you got to get going here. We just want to thank you again for taking time. We've been setting this up the last few weeks. Finally got a chance to do it. I'm very happy, and it's a privilege to talk to you and talk hoops. And, for me, talking to one of my favorite players growing up, like I said, I still got your jersey here. And, hopefully we could do this again and going more in depth on basketball and your time with the Cavs and Sonics.
No, absolutely, man. Anytime, just give me a shout back, man. I appreciate you guys, man.
Absolutely. And best of luck with your business and all of your community involvement as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's what it's all about. It's like, you play this game of basketball. You just want to put yourself in a position where you can, enjoy life and do some positive things, man.
Awesome. You keep doing that, Shawn.
Take care, man.
Yeah, you too. See you later. Thanks.
All right.
Wow, that was Shawn Kemp. He went and talked about Coach Mike Fratello unsolicited, because that was one of my questions. And he went right into talking about how great of a coach he was and how he puts him right up there with George Karl, who was also a former Cavs coach back in the early 80s, a long time ago. But that was interesting. He really had high praise from Mike Fratello. It's great to hear. I mean, it's great to hear that a coach of that he puts him way up there with a lot of the greats.
Yeah, the czar, as they call him, Mike Fratello. Right. And that's a good tease for another episode. We won't get into that right now. But, Mike Fratello was the Cavs coach in the late 90s, but he was Shawn's coach, I think, for his first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then they fired him. I thought it was a horrible move. And Shawn agrees. Sure. I know you do too. And they brought in Randy Whitman, a then rookie head coach, which was a disaster. But it just goes to show how much appreciation and respect Shawn had for Mike Fratello. I had no idea we were going to get into that. I had no idea he's even going to bring him up, which was really cool. I thought the other part, Scott, that was really enlightening and really happy to hear is him talk about his love for Cleveland. But like you said in the interview, it was a short amount of time, and we thought all these big things were going to happen. And they didn't really pan out. Not necessarily his fault. We didn't get into the NBA lockout, but that happened in his second year at the Cavs. Correct. It really screwed everything up in the NBA and for the Cavs. But you don't hear a lot of big name players in any professional sport really love Cleveland. Let's just be honest. Cleveland is not a free agent destination in all three sports. Okay. Right. But when you hear someone like Shawn saying that he wanted to play there, I went to the Cavs, which I did not know, to trade me.
Had no idea.
That was really cool to hear that.
Had no idea. No. Because he said, he said he took rides to Richfield, and he's like, where the hell's Richfield? What? I'm driving to Richfield to play in a game. He only knew the Coliseum. He comes to the All-Star game in February or January of '97, and he sees the city, which is in a resurgence with all the building going on, and he thought this is the place to be. This is the place to be. And who would have thought 8 months later he'd be in a Cavs uniform?
Yeah, right before training camp of that fall.
Right.
Before we started recording and before you hopped on, I was talking to Shawn a little bit about the Coliseum, and just to kind of shed some light, he said it was the most intimidating venue that he's ever played in.
Really?
Yeah. And he loved going there only because he liked to play in an intimidating place. So it was kind of a bittersweet love-hate thing. He said he loved playing there. Those Cavs teams were great. You hopped on right in the middle of that conversation, Scott. Again, this wasn't part of the interview. This is before we hit record. Right. But for all you listeners out there, he was talking about and reiterated to what Mark Price told us a few months ago in our first episode about if Jordan's Bulls weren't there and the Cavs didn't run into MJ, the Cavs would have multiple titles, at least maybe one during those years. So I know that wasn't part of our conversation, but it kind of, circles back to his Cleveland roots or his Cleveland points, if you will.
I was just looking up Shawn Kemp, and I was looking at his stats, and he's only 51. I mean, think about that. He retired when he was 33.
Yeah.
He's not an old guy. You think of, he's got to be, whatever age. He's only 51. He's doing a lot of business. He's doing a lot of involvement in the community. He's trying to give back, and it's just great to hear, him talk about his growing up in Indiana and just where he is after being in the, what was it, 30 years now, 32 years ago. He was
89,
his first year, 89. Yeah, it's 32 years ago. Isn't that scary?
14 years in the league, Sonics, Cavs, I believe Blazers, Magic, and then he retired. I think that's the order it went. I don't have his basketball reference page up right now.
Right.
The other thing too is, Scott, real quick, before we wrap this up, I love Shawn's take on some pop culture things about his shoes that I had. Do you remember those shoes?
Remember those shoes?
Yeah.
I remember those shoes. They were laying around the house all the time. And I'm like, I'd come home from college. And I'm like, John, you got to pick these up. Those are the shoes.
Those are the shoes. Exactly. And of course, NBA Jam, which means a lot for us because on the old Super Nintendo, we played NBA Jam constantly.
I play that in college all the time. I crank that up even now, like I said, with my son, and he just like, what, Dad, this is just ridiculous. I'm not playing this.
But it's great. And, the fact that he has it now in his shop was really cool to hear. And a guy still follows the NBA and still, can kind of relate to the game, how it has evolved a little bit. So really cool to hear Shawn Kemp. Just like every athlete that we have on this podcast, Scott, we can go on and on and on with him. But the other funny thing here, I love that story about Gary Payton and Jordan, the Ferrari. That was priceless.
Can you imagine that going to somebody? He goes, yeah, I get mine for free. I mean, you win, Jordan wins that conversation.
Yeah. And you know what? Gary Payton was the king of trash talking. Well, Jordan was king and he was underneath him, but that probably shut GP up pretty quickly.
Oh, big time.
Well, that'll wrap it up on this edition of Sabol Brothers on the Baseline. Thank you so much for listening to this latest edition of our podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. If you ever want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at John_Sabol. Our podcast handle is at Sabol Brothers.
And you can follow me on Twitter as well. It's my name, Scott Sabol, SCOTT, SABOL, FOX 8 on Twitter. You can send me a message. And if you have any suggestions, any podcast suggestions, hey, we'll see if we can do it for you.
We're going to have some social interaction coming up here once we have some guests planned out, where we're going to have you guys at home from Twitter asking some of us questions. We can then relate those questions to some of these guests that we have coming up. So you're going to get involved on this here very shortly. So keep an eyes and ears to Twitter. And thanks again for listening, everyone, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Remember, click subscribe if you haven't already on Apple or on Spotify. That'll wrap it up here on Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, all part of the Press Play Podcast Network. We'll see you next time.